Oh. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting of the Animal Services Advisory Board to order. We need to do, since we're on virtual, we have to do a roll call.
Matt Goddard.
Here.
Brittany Dale. Tom Colson.
Here.
Amy Neal.
Here.
Jack Brock.
Here.
Scott Velo.
Here.
Lauren Mercer. Carol Wilson.
Here.
Charlotte Ann Alexander.
Here.
Agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
Kelly?
Matt Goddard.
Yes.
Tom Colson.
Yes.
Amy Neal.
Yes.
Jack Brock.
Yes.
Scott Velo.
Yes.
Carol Wilson.
Yes.
Charlotte Ann Alexander.
Yes.
Everyone should have received copies of the minutes from our January 27th meeting. Do I have a motion for the approval of those minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Kelly?
Matt Goddard.
Yes.
Tom Colson.
Yes.
Amy Neal.
Yes.
Jack Brock.
Yes.
Scott Velo.
Yes.
Carol Wilson.
Yes.
Charlotte Ann Alexander.
Yes.
Approval of the minutes for the McMahon versus White dangerous dog appeal that was on that same evening.
So moved.
Do we have a second? Yep.
Matt Goddard.
Yes.
Tom Colson.
Yes.
Amy Neal.
Yes.
Jack Brock.
Yes.
Scott Velo.
Yes.
Carol Wilson.
Yes.
Charlotte Ann Alexander.
Yes.
All right.
Good evening.
Ms. Flavely.
So please forgive me my hecticness today. I think a piece of paper fell out from my stats, but I do email them out to you every month. And as you can see, we still are trending very positively and very upward each and every month. So I don't know where my sheet is to really break down January for you. If you have any questions about those stats I'd sent out, please let me know and I can get back with you on that. February, most of you are aware, we did have a 1 week kind of slow down, shut down period when we thought that there was possible COVID exposure where we were kind of halted, had to split into shifts to try to keep everybody isolated and safe. And, you know, worst case scenario that other people may test positive. I'm happy to say that all the shelter staff tested negative, but we did have like a 1 week down period. So because of that 1 week down period, our TNR's efforts were down. I also had 2 officers out for 10 days each. And then the Spay Today clinic had COVID. So they were also closed 2 weeks. So not being able to do spay and neuter and having to alter operations due to COVID by both agencies hurt our numbers for some categories. But then again, compared to February of 2020, dog live release rate was up 8.4%. Cat went down a little bit. And a lot of that is in the feral cat TNR efforts. Overall live release was still up 3.95%. The thing I'm most excited about is our reclaims were up in dogs, or overall by 20%, which is huge because our reclaim rate has been really, really low. I think that's a combination of things. I think it's a combination of Lisa in her office who spends a large amount of time talking with citizens who have lost and found pets and making matches. I've also like to think that maybe it is that pilot program that the officer started with the app of when they pick up dogs in the field, they immediately, you know, go up and, you know, just more awareness in general about lost and found animals in our community. Stats are still looking good. I mean, this week we've been hectic. Honestly, it's the most awesome problem in 18 years to have. As soon as animals are getting their stray holds, they're flying out the doors. When we left today, we left a few minutes early. We have 3 dogs on the adoption floor and 2 cats. It's like we clear them out, you fill them back up, you clear them out. We don't even know how to act, but we are ecstatic that we're having the turnover. I still attribute it to that one-on-one personal service of appointments is working really well for us. The construction project update, not a whole lot to say. We did have our bids on Monday and we only got 2 bids. So we are supposed to have at least 3, so we are having to re-advertise for 10 more days. And then it's my understanding, and Janice can correct me if I'm wrong, if we get another bid or more bids, great. If we don't after that 10-day period, then we can open the 2 bids that we received. So we are trying to get the renovation project back on to completely finish it. And I hope in the next 30 days, we'll be able to report that there's some movement forward. Any questions on that before I go on?
Has the litigation been solved yet, or are we still in?
I don't believe we're at a,
I hope to have a report for you at your next meeting.
Okay.
still in process. That's
Okay.
really Janice's
Yes.
headache for now. So hopefully, like, again, in the next 30 days or 60 days, we will have a lot of news to report on all of that. Do you want to mention real quick that I didn't put on the agenda? Lisa Adamson, our office, is participating and was chosen. It's best friends in partnership with Southern Utah University for a manager leadership certification. It's the first cohort of this kind. If people wanted or needed it, the credits can serve towards an undergraduate or a graduate degree, valued at $7,500. So she's only about 3 weeks in. She gets on a Zoom and has homework assignments and different things every week. But pleased that, we have a staff member being able to take advantage of that. Don't really have any other news. Like I said, we're having great success, and it helps by the easy adoptables going out the door. It's given us the luxury to save. I don't know how many of you are aware of our social media. Animals that almost 100% would face euthanasia. We had 2 beagles come in with deformities. They couldn't bend their knees. Back in the day, that would have been automatic euthanasia. Because we've had the luxury of space and time, we were able to post them, make videos, network them, and a rescue came and pulled them together yesterday. So, that's a big morale booster for staff. When you have friendly dogs that before you would have to put down for no fault of their own because of space and other factors, that we can actually up our life-saving efforts. So real excited about that. The policies and procedures, the committee gave me a lot of feedback, and we, sent a lot of emails back and forth furiously. Finally made some changes and got it to a level they were comfortable with, sending it out to the whole board. Did send that out. So there were 2 parts because it's really hard to capture everything we do. So I thought the handbook supplement and, in addition was a good way to do it. Started this in 2018, so I'm really hoping to finally get some forward movement on it and roll it out to staff. So I'd like to know how the board feels, feedback on that, or if they're ready for a vote on if you do approve it, if I can proceed.
I endorse it. I think that the other members of the committee feel the same way. I'm not sure if you all have anything you'd like to say, but I thought it was great.
Bravo.
Did you have any questions for the committee? Mr.
No,
Chair?
I thought everything was fine.
Can I get like an actual motion and a
Yeah, that's
approval
what I
on
was about to
that?
ask.
I'd move to approve both the both documents. What were they again, Michelle?
It's all of the PCAS policies and procedures. I just labeled the one handbook, but it's all, I'm gonna roll it all out together.
Well, I'd make a motion to approve all of the policies.
I second it.
Matt Goddard.
Is this going to go from us to the commissioners?
I don't believe an internal policy has to go to the commissioners. Yeah, I will just start, I'm probably gonna break it down in sections and start rolling it out with my staff and do in-service trainings instead of giving them a copy, expecting them to comprehend the whole thing. I'm probably gonna just divide it up and start in-service trainings. It'll be really helpful for new employees when we're onboarding new employees.
I think so.
Absolutely. It's pretty
I love a handbook.
Yeah.
Yes.
Matt Goddard, yes. Tom Colson.
Yes.
Amy Neal.
Yes.
Jack Brock.
Yes.
Scott Belo.
Yes.
Carol Wilson.
Yes.
Charlotte Ann Alexander.
Yes.
Thank you. lastly, and I know we don't have a ton of time left, just want to at least start the discussion. Our office is receiving more and more complaints about dogs attacking different types of animals. Before it used to be simply, other dogs or cats. We're getting so many more increase of dogs attacking chickens, dog attacking goats, whatever. So I got looking at our ordinance and I'm like, we do not have a definition for domesticated animal. So I sent a message to Janice and she agreed and said, do you want me to maybe draft something regarding this topic? And I said, yes, please. So that's when the memo went out on March 9th. I sent it to Matt and then Matt told me to send it out to everybody. So I don't know if we just want to start a discussion on that but I would really like the board, if the board ASAB comes up with something and approves it, then we would take it to the county commissioners to approve for it to be added to our ordinance. That would be the procedures. But I really think we try to stay very consistent in the way we handle all these type of complaints, but I think that lack of definition, I think it'll make it clearer to the public. It'll make it easier for staff. It'll make it easier for the board members when they have to hear appeals. But I really think it's time for us to address and maybe add a definition to our ordinances.
Thoughts, comments?
I
plans?
agree. I think we definitely need a definition. I appreciated, the reference to the other ordinances that have been found. I'm still having a problem with how you domesticate a chicken. I'm just not sure how that works. So, not that I'm prejudiced at all, but, I think we do, we do need an official definition so that when these cases come before us, the people are aware of where we stand.
I would agree. I think the memo that Janice drafted was excellent. And I really like the Rutherfordton NC ordinance. In looking at the case law right now, it looks like domestic animal in accordance with North Carolina law is very broad. I'll let Janice confirm that. So if we don't like the way we had to rule last case, I think we have to narrow it. And I think Rutherfordton does a really nice job. I think one issue is if livestock is injured, someone can always go to small claims court. It's not necessarily our role to police that. So that would be my thoughts.
Although it's usually a fairly de minimis recovery. I mean, let's face it, you're not going to get much of a recovery. And if you have an animal that has been raised in a family as a pet, and I think some of this is hinging on what's a pet. How's the animal treated? Is the animal, if you're not selling an animal for meat purposes, basically, and the animal is treated as a pet, I'm not sure we necessarily exclude chickens. I don't have chickens. I've never had chickens, but nowadays we're seeing more and more people see them as pets. We're probably going to see more of this post-COVID because a bunch of people got chickens. So I'm not sure they should be excludable. And I liked Rutherfordton except for the chicken thing because we keep seeing this as a real issue. And certainly Michelle's seeing it and having to make determinations about it. I looked at the ordinance, and maybe y'all can fill me in because I'm a little newer to this. I'm trying to find what the purpose of the dangerous dog ordinance was. There's no purpose. And obviously I don't mean to be obtuse. Well, if the dog's dangerous, but what's the point? Are we protecting people? Are we protecting traditional sort of household pets, a cat or a dog? And to some extent, we make arbitrary lines when we say it's a cat and it's a dog, and maybe it's somebody's bunny, but maybe it's not a bunny. For me, it hinged on, has this animal been treated like a pet? Has it been considered by a pet as the family? And certainly I think it would be excludable if the animal would have been considered, a meat animal, so to speak. I'm not concerned about eggs or like harvesting Angora fur from a rabbit or something. So I'm not sure chickens should be excluded.
But would you exclude horses? Because I know people that consider horses pets. And
I wouldn't necessarily know. I think my, when I looked at domestic animals, it's tantamount to pet. You look at the interpretation of pet, to some extent it is situational, but it's how is the animal treated in the family. But I realize we're bleeding lines with livestock. I don't think there's a bright line, and that's the problem,
yeah.
especially as people are expanding what they consider as a pet.
I don't know that you can describe a domesticated animal or pet on some platitude that covers everything. And I'll tell you, the reason I wanted to be here tonight in particular is, as I stated a little while ago, I always wanted to be, as the liaison to this board, to the commissioners, I always wanted to be able to go forward and say, I agree with something, that this board has put forward. But I'm going to say that birds are chased by dogs and cats. And a recent court case, I don't know what the outcome was at Superior Court, where they made their appeal, where apparently a dog had killed some chickens. I can see the recovery of the value of the chicken. But to call a chicken a pet, well, if we're going to do that, its offspring is an egg. By golly, it's a pet. May not have hatched yet, but it's a pet. At what point do we absolutely draw the line? I mean,
That family considered them a pet.
Well, I got moles in my backyard, and I'm very partial to the moles. I don't like voles, but I'm being facetious, obviously. But if I'm going to sit down and my next door neighbor's dog jumps over my fence and gets into my yard and digs up a mole and kills it, does that give me the right to call that mole a pet?
Depends how you treated it.
Well, I think
just
you've
think
got
we're
a
being
good
absurd.
point though, because I have heard of, I don't know them personally, but I have heard of people, and I don't know if they're in North Carolina, but in the US that have wolves. They are true wolves, but because they are similar to dogs, they have wolves and they consider them their pet.
Wolves can be trained. They can be domesticated.
Yeah.
You don't, just because it's a wolf by breed doesn't mean that it's in the wild.
And I
That is
think,
true.
just to add to that, I think a wolf under our ordinance is considered an
A wild
exotic
animal.
animal.
Yeah.
Is that right, Janice?
Yeah.
So I think there's some restrictions on
Yeah.
So is a mole an exotic animal?
No. That sounds
By
like
statute.
a prey animal to me. And I think that's where you draw the line, is you look at
When
what
I
the
was-
prey animals
When
are.
I was in Charlotte, is we had neighbors back behind us that had chickens, and the chickens were in a fence. But normally when you feed chickens, you overfeed them. And when you overfeed them, guess what happens? You get mice. And when you get mice, what normally follows that? Snakes. Well, I was out there, my firstborn, she's about 2 years old. She's running around our yard that was a fenced in yard. And lo and behold, I'm back there at this fence, and I'm working away in our garden. And right next to my foot is a copperhead. And I know that copperhead was there to get those mice and stuff that were around the chicken's fence. When I tried to do something in a city of Charlotte, is it had an ordinance that said that certain, farm animals were exempted or whatever. But because it didn't mention a chicken per se, then I had no recourse. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't get them. I even offered to move their pen. I would do it, physically do all the work, but they wouldn't see to it. And so now my daughter is constantly threatened by snakes, potentially, because they wanted to have chickens. And what about the people in the neighborhood that when they're feeding their chickens, they might have the same condition? The other day, about a half mile from where I live, I'm riding down the road, and they had at this one house had these chickens and they're running loose all the time, and a car hit that chicken. Now, wait a minute. Is that driver of that car for having hit that chicken, do they need to stop and apologize and pay for it? And the owner let the chicken run wild. And this incident with the dogs, as I understand it, they let the chickens run wild. The dog apparently jumped its fence, got out, and killed the chicken off of their property.
I think the other issue is, and I'd like to ask your opinion on this, Janice, if you could opine. But one issue I'm having with a more subjective definition of domestic animals is, at what point does the ordinance become void for vagueness? Because the way we've got it right now, since it's not defined, we have to look at case law. If it's subjective, that gives this board a whole lot of discretion. And I feel like a bright line rule, we can treat everybody the same. If it's subjective, we might have disparate results, which might not be viewed as fairly. So that was another concern I had.
I think that's a very valid concern, and one that you're at risk of right now with your lack of definition.
Right.
Because one panel might decide that based on the way chickens were treated, they're domesticated, and find a dog to be dangerous. And another panel may find that it's not domesticated. And so I strongly recommend that you include some definition within your ordinance, and that definition be very clear. I think it's within the discretion of the board to determine whether you want it to be broad or narrow. The other thing I would suggest is that you can, as a board, I don't think you have to agree on what is a domesticated animal. I think you just have to agree on the scope of your dangerous dog ordinance. So you may find or have individual beliefs on whether a chicken or a goat can be domesticated. But going back to Charlotte Ann's question about what's the purpose of the ordinance, the purpose of the ordinance is really twofold. One, to be sure we're complying with state law directives. And state law talks about dangerous dogs, and we carry out a dangerous dog program through our ordinance. Second, we can limit that, but the original scope when this was very first prepared was for the protection of people and for the notion that if a dog killed a household pet, like a dog or a cat, that they were likely to repeat that behavior and escalate that to a small child.
Right.
So I think you can still believe that chickens and goats and donkeys could be domesticated based on the way you treat them, but determine that your dangerous dog section of your comprehensive animal ordinance will be narrowed in scope to those domestic animals that meet the definition within your ordinance. And that might be the way you want to land on it. And then that definition would need to be specific. So that, and I would say plain language, so that any resident who picks up our ordinance knows exactly what the outcome will be before they even make their complaint.
So do we need to define domestic animal, or do we need to define pet?
I think we need to find
Domestic animal.
for
It
the-
seems
for
like
the-
that's more statutorily
for the-
in sync.
for the purposes of the dangerous dog
Yeah.
ordinance.
Right. If you want to minimize the number of changes, currently your definition of dangerous dog is one that has inflicted severe injury upon a domestic animal. So you can then define domestic animal to give meaning to that term the same way we define severe for severe injury. My fear is if you change domesticated animal to pet, then you're still going to have to define pet, and you'll have changes in two different places.
Yeah.
So you can define domesticated animal not for a global purpose, but domestic animal for purposes of this
Of this
provision of the
ordinance.
ordinance shall mean dog, cat, or other indoor household pet.
So Janice, does that mean that something that Jack had said a little while ago, that through small claims, that maybe within the ordinance, it might say that if something happens to something else, maybe even list a few of them, is to steer the people in the right direction would be through small claims court.
Yeah, or you might just want to generally say the incidence is not covered by this ordinance, shall be a private matter between the parties outside of the Animal Services Advisory Board.
I'm good
Because-
with that.
I'm
And-
good with
Jurisdiction is there, somebody might have some such significant damages that small claims court
Right.
might not be appropriate.
Yeah,
So it would depend on the individual situation. I think it is fine to generally say that if it's not covered by the ordinance, that it would be a private matter between the parties.
Well, I put high value on my mole.
Could we put in our policies and procedures something up to the effect, or have a memo that says if it falls outside the dangerous dog ordinance, staff can say, well, look, this is a civil matter? Because I think that's what the sheriff's office does
Yes.
sometimes.
Yes.
You know, we only enforce, criminal, it's not criminal, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And they try to drag us in that stuff now, even with a really cut and dry case that meets the ordinance. They're always pressuring my officers or calling and yelling at us, what about my vet bill? And we tell them that's a civil matter. So we already do a lot of, we can't do anything about recouping your loss.
Right.
We already get hammered with that pretty much. Even dog bites, you know, if a dog bites and we put it under quarantine, they want to know who's going to pay their medical bills, and we tell them all the time, that is not something we can do. All we can do is quarantine the animal, you know, and do what the statute allows us to do, so we get put in those positions a lot.
Michelle, if we narrowed the definition of domestic animal for the purposes of dangerous dog, would that help y'all conserve any of your resources, you think?
I just think it makes it clear and consistent, and then my officers don't have to come to me and Chris, and then we're like, oh, let's call Janice, and it's just if we all can. And I think what I would do is if we do go a different direction or add it, tweak it, whatever, I'd probably have Janice talk to staff, you know, all together to make sure we can answer all staff's questions, to make sure no matter who's answering a citizen's complaint or inquiry, we're consistent, we all are on the same page, and we know what to tell them. To just make it easier. It seems like this officer that's present tonight, her area is the one that this keeps happening in for whatever reason. So some officers get affected more than others, but it would be nice just for everybody to be on the same page, no matter who they talk to, make sure we all understand and we all believe in our saying and enforcing, and just to be as consistent and treat the citizens the same as much as possible. Do you have any thoughts?
If you were comfortable with the language in the Rutherfordton ordinance, you can put that in there. If you want more time to think about it, I can bring back draft language to your May meeting, and then you can consider adoption at your May meeting, and then we can take it to the commissioners for approval after that. It's nice to have ordinance changes effective July 1, and I also think it's important that we educate not only the officers, but also the public about what that change is, so folks will have a clear expectation, and that'll give us some time to do that. Either way, whether you say you're ready to do it tonight, or whether you want to see some language brought back into your particular ordinance at your May meeting.
Well, my thing about the Rutherfordton one already is the fish pond. Because then gonna have people start coming back with their outside caged birds. I mean, this thing, it's constantly going to be some type of expansion of something.
But it's defined at least that way. And it's clear for Michelle and her staff, and then it's clear for us in making determinations.
I don't think any fish you throw in a pond outside is a pet or a domestic animal.
I mean,
It's
yeah.
yeah,
a part of our case to, well, I can't even talk about the case tonight.
Well, it's just a slippery slope if it's
Yeah.
not defined.
Yeah,
It is, but we have to recognize that the definition of pet for people is expanding, and it's not just a dog and a cat necessarily.
But I just feel like that's going to open the door to, and it very rarely could well ever happen, but a fish in a pond outside, somebody's goldfish or koi goes away. It could very well be a bird. Yeah, I mean, it would be, that's my Rutherfordton thing. It could be a bird that's dipped in there. Just because you saw a dog drinking out of that pond don't mean he ate fish.
yeah.
Well, and it ends up being a little arbitrary then, right? You know, what if the cat gets it? Well, you can't do a dangerous cat. So,
That's right.
you know.
So there's more levels. I'm always cautious about expanding and putting in new things and changing stuff.
I just feel like
We have to have something, obviously.
The chicken thing bugs me, and I'm not really sure why I'm sticking on it, except that I know more and more people who really love their chickens as pets. You know, maybe they are allergic to cats and dogs, but they can have chickens, and their kids love them, and it's part of their family. And you know, that's Bobby the chicken, and that's so and so the chicken, and
I had one-eyed Fred when I was
there you go.
And I mean, one-eyed Fred was a cool chicken. I hated
Yeah.
when he wasn't with us anymore. But
So
Yeah.
if dogs are not allowed to run wild, they've got to be controlled. Do chickens have to be controlled? The
I mean, I
people
think
that
your
own
animal
chickens,
needs to
some
stay
of
in
them
your
let 'em
yard,
Free
period.
feed.
Your animal should be in your yard. There's a problem if they're not.
same way with the cats, but they're not.
But we can only deal with the
Y'all
ordinance
still
we've
have cat
got.
problems and
Right,
Sherry, y'all still have the lady with the pigs?
we do. In fact, she's a good friend
Do
of
you
my
want to
wife.
check to see if Scott or Amy have any feedback?
That'd be good.
Scott, Amy, I guess we've kind of turned away from our TV screens. Y'all have an opinion on this at all?
I was thinking about, maybe it would be best to also define livestock and then have the domestic animal definition be something that would exclude animals that are typically viewed as livestock, which would include chickens, ducks.
The Rutherfordton, on the
Right.
memo, the Rutherfordton one does have a livestock definition, but I think if we do domestic, we'd have to include livestock, I feel like, which then is just more definitions. And then we get into breeders of domestic animals versus breeders of livestock. We already have, that's an issue at some point coming up down the road, I'm sure, right?
Hey, Janice, to digress a little bit, with the shooting of guns, that committee,
I didn't do it.
and one of the things we talked about are livestock. Does that somehow dovetail in with this?
I'll keep the two separate because the livestock ending its life from a gun versus the dog bite, two different arenas,
Okay,
but related.
all right.
So do y'all like either one of Janice's suggestions, simmer on it?
Well, I
Or
like the
bring back
idea of her
anything different?
bringing something back, let us read it, and then next meeting, approve it hopefully and send it forward to the commissioners for action.
Do y'all think that how do y'all feel about asking Janice to use the Rutherford
Yeah,
ordinance as a starting place?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
for sure.
agree
Yeah.
with
That's a
that.
good one.
And I can eliminate, would the board like me to use Rutherfordton, but eliminate the language about fish? Since they're
Yes.
not
Yes.
likely to ever have anything about a fish.
Yeah.
We can about fish in aquariums and fish in ponds.
Yeah.
And work from the remainder, which will also then address the concern of defining livestock and farm animals and excluding.
I think so.
I think the thing I like about Rutherfordton is I'm familiar with that area, and it's it's mountainous, but it's very similar in environment as here. It's got a lot of rural areas, and so I think we need to. I like that as a starting point.
I might even strike caged birds. I mean, gosh, cats will eat a caged birds in a minute. We don't have dangerous cat hearings,
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Use my opinion.
Michelle, one question that I have is if we delay, and I am in favor of delaying it, the further discussion until May. Is there a way that we could get it beforehand, Janice's work recommendation beforehand, so that we can really be prepared to
Maybe
comment on it?
Most definitely.
Okay,
Now
thank you.
that we kind of started the discussion and we kind of heard some different viewpoints and thoughts, I think it'll be easier. Can't speak for Janice, but she's pretty much a wizard in my book. So I think it'll be easier for us to narrow it down to give you stuff to seriously look at. I just wanted to definitely bring it up. to get the conversation started.
Thank
Does
you.
I don't
the,
feel pressured that this has to be done in the next 30 days. I do think a discussion needed to be started.
does like the cooperative extension, the agricultural crowd, do they have a definition they work off of what a livestock is compared to domesticated animal?
We can check with them. Not that,
We can find out.
yeah,
And
we'll
I
we'll
can-
outreach.
I didn't know if maybe they would have a definition, so Pitt County would then have two definitions of something and.
I can have drafts ready in the next week or so that we can send out to you. And if I gather some additional information, I might even have an option 1 draft and an option 2 draft, if they're sufficiently different for the board to consider and either pick one or modify them.
In your time, like you said, you wanted it, July 1 is the best time to try and get something like that done.
I will have it effective July 1.
Right.
And then that will give you some lead time to provide some education on the change ahead of time.
Yeah.
Because if this board considers it in May and adopts it or doesn't, that will still give you the whole month of June to get before the 2 meetings in June to get before the commission.
All right, so is that something we need to make a motion on to tell you to start working on it? Okay.
I'll do it.
I've got one more comment, if we've got a second. I think because we're talking about this being, pertinent only to the dangerous dog ordinance, that we can afford to be somewhat more narrow with the definition of domestic animal. Does it really, a dog attacks chickens? Well, we breed bird dogs all the time. Does that make a dog necessarily a dangerous dog? And, so we have to, I think, I don't know, maybe narrow it down somewhat to just animals that would normally be perhaps indoors or around children or with children frequently as domestic animals in order to try and eliminate some of the other things like a dog killing a chicken or a duck or a dog pulling a fish out of a pond or something like that.
Does that become a problem though for somebody that keeps a dog on a leash and chains a house out in the yard all the time that never sees the inside of the house?
Yeah, I don't think we should say indoor animals, but it could be part of the definition because it may be dogs, cats, and then include some of that.
Yeah.
I thought the same thing. Yeah.
Well, I'm all for not rushing for July 1st. Mainly because I wonder if there is some sort of a Pandora's box here. And there would not miss an opportunity. Jack and I mentioned, what you mentioned when we first got here. Do we need to look at how we and kind of make the the dangerous dog ordinance and the appeal process harder to get through?
We've had this is an interesting topic. We've had some really frivolous cases come through, and it would be nice if there was a fee that people had to pay to file these things. I mean, gosh, we had one lady file one, and she said, "I know the dog's not dangerous. I just want him fixed." I mean, that's a waste of the board's time, in my opinion, and it's an abuse of the process.
Maybe almost like an opportunity to look at the whole thing and some other processes and
Courts charge
take time.
courts charge fees for hearings all the time. You got to pay the court to have.
Even if it's nominal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just a little barrier to entry.
I'm not for fees.
Yeah, I'm a non-fee person.
Fee is a 3-letter word, just like tax.
Yeah, I'm a fee hater. I got on this board because I was a fee hater.
Are there many frivolous appeals? Is this something that happens frequently? Like, is it a
I don't
problem?
want to say on recorded video.
Could we declare it a frivolous request?
I think that's a question for Janice.
There's been many that I considered very frivolous,
I mean,
where you could see it was more animosity than it was.
we don't want to put Michelle on the spot
righteousness.
because she's trying to, walk that tightrope.
That might be just a research topic for a later date. Is that a fair request to ask, Janice?
That'd be fine.
Okay.
So I say don't rush yourself too much. not in the next week. Take your time and study up on it and
Your
bring us some
copious
solid
amounts of
things.
free time. that you have.
Sorry to give you more projects.
Yeah, that's fine. I'd be happy to look into it.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate you as always. Is there any other discussion needed? There is an appeal coming up. Scott, Amy, and I will be stepping out, and the other four will be taking over from there, I believe. Is there anything else? Michelle, are you done?
I'm good.
Kelly, you good? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Kelly?
Matt Goddard,
Yes.
Tom Colson.
Yes.
Amy Neal,
Yes.
Jack Brock,
Yes.
Scott Belo,
Yes.
Carol Wilson,
Yes.
Charlotte Ann Alexander.
Yes.
Thank you all.